All right. So last time we left off with how hermaphroditus came into existence, which is basically that a nymph saw a young man that she liked. She ran after him. He ran away from her. He jumped into the water. She basically attacked him, wouldn't let go, pleaded to the gods to make them into one person, which the gods did for whatever reason. So let's continue on, shall we? Their tales did end, and Minon's daughters still their business ply, in spite of Bacchus, whose high feast they break contemptuous lie. When on the sodden, seeking not, they heard about them round of tubbish timbrels perfectly, a hoarse and jarring sound, with dreaming shawms and jingling bells, and furthermore, they felt a scent of saffron and myrrh that very hotly smelt, and, which a man would ill believe, the web they had begun immediately waxed fresh and green. The flax, the which they spun, did flourish, full of ivy leaves, and part thereof did run abroad in vines. The thread itself in branches forth did spring, young bourgeons full of clustered grapes, the self-same color grew. The day was spent, and now was come the time which neither night the day was spent, which neither night nor day, but middle bound of both the man may term of right. The house at sodden seemed to shake, and all about it shine with burning lamps, and glittering fires to flash before their eyes. To flash before their eyes. I thought I had my finger in the right spot. And somehow, I guess that wasn't at the end of the, okay. Oh, it's because it said before their eyen. Well, that's special. And likenesses of ugly beasts with ghastful noises yelled, for fear whereof in smoky holes the sisters were compelled to hide their heads, one here and there another, for to shun the glistering light. And while they thus in corners blindly run upon their little pretty limbs, a fine crisp film there goes, and slender fins instead of hands their shortened arms enclose. But how they lost their former shape of certainty to know the darkness would not suffer them. No feathers on them grow, and yet with sheer and vellum wings they hover from the ground, and when they go about to speak, they make but little sound, according as their bodies give, bewailing their despite by chirping surely to themselves. In houses they delight, and not in woods, detesting day they flitter towards night, wherethrough they of the evening late in Latin take their name, and we in English language backs or rear mice call the same. Then Bacchus' name was reverenced through all the Theban coast, and Ino of her nephew's power made everywhere great boast. Of Cadmus' daughters, she alone no sorrows tasted had, save only that her sisters haps perchance had made her sad. Now Juno, noting how she waxed both proud and full of scorn, as well by reason of the sons and daughters she had borne, and also that she was advant by marriage in that town to Acacamus, King Aeolus' son, a prince of great renown, but chiefly that her sister's son, who nursed was by her, was then exalted for a god, began thereat to stir, and fretting at it in herself said, could this harlot's bird transform the Lydian watermen and drown them in the ford, and make the mother tear the guts in pieces of her son? And Menelaus saw 3 daughters clad with wings, because they spun, whiles other howling up and down like frantic folk did run. And can I, Juno, nothing else save sundry woes bewail? Is that sufficient? Can my power no more than so avail? He teaches me what way to work. A man may take, I see, example at his enemy's hand the wiser for to be. He shows enough and overmuch the force of furious wrath by Pentheus' death. Why should not Ina be taught to tread the path the which her sisters heretofore and kindred trodden hath? There is a steep and irksome way, obscure with shadow fell, of baleful yew, all sad and still, that leadeth down to hell. The foggy Styx doth breath up mists, and down this way do wave the ghosts of persons lately dead and buried in the grave. Continual cold and ghastly fear possess this quitchy plot on either side. The silly ghost, new parted, knoweth not the way that doth directly lead him to the Stygian city, or where black Pluto keeps his court that never showeth pity. 1,000 ways, 1,000 gates that always open stand this city hath, and as the seas that streams of all the land doth swallow in his greedy gulf, and yet is never full, even so that place devoureth still, and hideth in his gull the souls and ghosts of all the world. And though that near so many come thither, yet the place is void, as if there were not any, the ghosts without flesh, blood, or bones. There wander to and fro, of which some haunt the judgment place, and other come and go to Pluto's court. And some frequent the former trades and arts the which they used in their life, and some abide the smarts and torments for their wickedness and other ill deserts. So cruel hate and spiteful wrath did boil in Juno's breast, that in the high and noble court of heaven she could not rest, but that she needs must hither come, whose feet no sooner touched the threshold but it gan to quake. And Cerberus, erst couched, started sternly up with 3 fell heads which barked all together. She called the daughters of the night, the cruel furies, thither. They say to trembling foul black snakes from of their filthy here before the dungeon door, the place where caitives punished were, the which was made of adamant, when in the darkened part they knew Queen Juno. By and by upon their feet they start. There Titius, stretched out at least 9 acres full in length, did with his bowels feed a gripe that tear them out by strength. The water fled from Tantalus, that touched his neither lip, and apples hanging over him did every from him slip. There also labored Sisyphus, that drave against the hill a rolling stone, that from the top came tumbling downward still. Ixion, on his restless wheel, to which his limbs were bound, did fly and follow both at once, in turning ever round. And Aeneas' daughters, for because they did their cousins kill, drew water into running tubs, which evermore did spill. When Juno, with a lowering look, had viewed them all throughout, and on Ixion specially before the other rout, she turns from him to Sisyphus, and with an angry cheer says, "Wherefore should this man endure continual penance here, and Athamas his brother reign in wealth and pleasure free? Who through his pride hath any disdain my husband Jove and me? And therewithal she poured out the occasion of her hate, and why she came, and what she would. She would that Cadmus' state should with the ruin of his house be brought to swift decay, and that to mischief Athamas the fiend should force some way. She bids, she prays, she promises, and all is with a breath and moves the Furies earnestly. And as these things she saith this hateful hag, Tisiphone, with hoary ruffled hair, removing from her face the snakes that loosely dangled there, said thus: Madam, there is no need long circumstance to make. Suppose your will already done, this loathsome place forsake, and to the wholesome air of heaven yourself again retire. Queen Juno went right glad away with grant of her desire, and as she would have entered heaven, the Lady Iris came and purged her with steaming drops. Anon upon the same the furious fiend Tisiphone doth cloth her hair, doth clothe her out of hand in garments streaming gory blood, and taketh in her hand a burning cresset steeped in blood, and girdeth her about with wreathed snakes, and so goes forth. And at her going out, fear, terror, grief, and pensiveness for company she took, and also madness, with his flight and ghastly staring look. Within the house of Athamas, no sooner foot she set, but that the posts began to quake, and doors looked black as jet. The sun withdrew him, Athamas, and each his wife were cast with ugly sights, and such a fear, that out of doors aghast they would have fled. There stood the fiend, and stopped their passage out, and splaying forth her filthy arms, beknit with snakes about, did toss and wave her hateful head. The swarm of scaled snakes did make an irksome noise to hear, as she her tresses shakes. About her shoulders did some cruel, some trailing down her breast, did hiss, and spit out poison green, and spurt with tongues infest. Then, from amid her hair, 2 snakes with venomed hand she drew, of which she one at Athamas, and one at Ino threw. The snakes did crawl about their breasts, inspiring in their heart most grievous motions of the mind. The body had no smart of any wound, it was the mind that felt the cruel stings. A poison made in syrup wise she also with her brings, the filthy fame of Cerberus, the casting of the snake Echidna, bred among the fens about the Stygian lake. Desire of gadding forth abroad, forgetfulness of mind, delight in mischief, witness, tears, and purpose, whole inclined to cruel murder, all the which she did together grind, and mingling them with new shed blood, had boiled them in brass, and stirred them with a hemlock stalk. Now, while that Athamas and Ino stood and quaked for fear, this poison rank and fell she turned into both their breasts, and made their hearts to swell. Then, whisking them often round about her head, her baleful brand she made it soon by gathering wind to kindle in her hand. Thus, as it were in triumph, wise accomplishing her hest, to dusky Pluto's empty realm she gets her home to rest, and putteth of the snarled snakes that girded in her breast. Immediately King Aeolus' son stark mad comes crying out through all the court, What mean ye, sirs? Why go ye not about to pitch our toils within this chase? I saw even now here ran a lion with her 2 young whelps, and therewithal he gan to chase his wife, as if indeed she had a lion been. And like a bedlam boisterously he snatched from between the mother's arms his little babe Laertes smiling on him, and reaching forth his pretty arms, and flung him fiercely from him twice or thrice as from a sling, and dashed his tender head against a hard and rugged stone until he saw him dead. The wretched mother, whether grief did move her thereunto, or that the poison spread within did force her so to do, hauled out and frantically, with scattered hair about her ears, and with her little melicert, which hastily she bears in naked arms, she crieth out, Ho, Bacchus! At the name of Bacchus, Juno gan to laugh, ha 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 ha, and scorning said in game, This god and lo, thy foster child requiteth for the same. There hangs a rock above the sea, the foot whereof is eat, so hollow with the saltest waves which on the same do beat, that like a house it keepeth off the moisting showers of rain, the top is rough, and shoots his front amidst the open main. Dame Ino, madness made her strong, did climb this cliff anon, and headlong down, without regard of hurt that hung thereon, did throw her burden and herself. The water where she dashed and sprinkling upward glistered red. But Venus, sore abashed at this her niece's great mischance, without offence or fault, her uncle gently thus spake, O ruler of the halt and swelling seas, O noble Neptune, whose dominion large extended to the heaven, whereof the mighty Jove hath charge, the thing is great for which I sow. But show thou for my sake some mercy on my wretched friends, whom in that endless lake thou seest tossed to and fro. Admit thou them among thy gods. Of right even here to me some favour doth belong, at least wise, if amid the sea engendered erst were a froth, as of the which yet still my pleasant name I bear. Neptunus granted her request, and by bereft them of all that ever mortal was. Instead whereof he left them a halt and stately majesty, and altering them in hue with shape and names most meet for gods, he did them both endue. Leucothoe was the mother's name, Palemon was the son. The Theban ladies following her as fast as they could run, did of her feet perceive the print upon the utter stone, and taking it for certain sign that they were both dead and gone, in making moan for Cadmus' house, they wrang their heads and tare their hair and rent their clothes, and railed on Juno out of square as nothing just, but more outrageous far than did behove in so revenging of herself upon her husband's love. The goddess Juno could not bear their railing, and in faith you also will I make to be as a witness, she saith, of my outrageous cruelty. And so she did indeed, for she that loved Ino best was following her with speed into the sea. But as she would herself have downward cast, she could not stir, but to the rock is nailed, sticked fast. The second, as she knocked her breast, did feel her arms wax stiff. Another, as she stretched out her hands upon the cliff, was made a stone. And there stood still I, stretching forth her hands into the water as before. And as another stands, a tearing of her ruffled locks, her fingers hardened were, and fastened to her frizzled top still, tearing of her hair. And look, what gesture each of them was taken in that tide, even in the same transformed to stones they fastened did abide. And some were altered into birds which Cadmus called bee, and in that gulf with flittering wings still to and fro do flee. Not knoweth Cadmus that his daughter and her little child admitted were among the gods that rule the sturges wild, compelled with grief and great mishaps that had ensued together, in strange foretokens often seen, since first his coming thither, he utterly forsakes his town, the which he builded had. as though the fortune of the place so hardly him bestad, and not his own. And fleeting long like pilgrims at the last upon the cast of Ilri his wife and he were cast, were nigh forepined with cares and years, while of the chances past upon their house, and of their toils and former travails, ta'en they sadly talked between themselves. Was my spare head the bane of that same ugly snake of Mars, quoth Cadmus, when I fled from Sidon? Or did I his teeth in ploughed pastures bred? If for the death of him the goddess so cruel vengeance take, drawn out in length upon my womb, then trail I like a snake. He had no sooner said the word, but then he 'gan to glide upon his belly like a snake, and on his heart inside he felt the scale new budding out, the which was wholly fret with speckled drops of black and grey, as thick as could be set. He falleth, grovelling on his breast, and both his shanks do grow in one round spindle, bodkin-wise, with sharpened point below. His arms as yet remain still, his arms that did remain he stretched out, and said with tears that plenteously did rain adown his face, which yet did keep the native fashion sound, Come hither, wife, come hither, wight, most wretched on the ground, and while that aught of me remains vouchsafe to touch the same, come take me by the hand, as long as hand may have his name, before this snakish shape do hoe my body overrun. He would have spoken more, when suddenly his tongue began to split in two, and speech did fail. And as he did attempt to make his moan, he hissed, for nature had now clean exempt all other speech. His wretched wife her naked stomach beat, and cried, What meaneth this? Dear Cadmus, where are now thy feet? Where are thy shoulders, and thy hands? Thy hue and manly face, with all the other things that did thy princely person grace, which now I overpass. But why, ye gods, do you delay my body unto like the shape of serpent to convey? When this was spoken, Cadmus licked his wife about the lips, and, as a place with which he was acquainted well, he slips into her bosom, lovingly embracing her, and cast himself about her neck as oft he had in time past. Such as there were, their folk were there, were flated at the sight, for by and by they saw their necks did glister slick and bright, and on their snakish head grew crests, and finally they both were into very dragons turned, and forth together goth tone trailing by t'other's side, until they gained a wood, the which direct against the place whereas they were then stood. And now remembering what they were themselves in times forepast, they neither shun nor hurten men with stinging nor with blast, but yet a comfort to them both, and this their altered hue became that noble imp of theirs that Indies did subdue, whom all Achaia worshipped with temples builded new. All only Acrisa Abba's son, though of the self-same stock, remained, who out of Argus walls unkindly did him lock, and moved wilful war against his godhead, thinking that there was not any race of gods, for he believed not that Perse was the son of Jove, or that he was conceived by Danae of golden shower, through which she was deceived. But yet ere long, such present force hath truth, he doth repent, as well his great impiety against god Bacchus meant, and also that he did disdain his nephew for to know, but Bacchus now full gloriously himself in heaven doth show, and Perse, bearing in his hand the monster Gorgon's head, that famous spoil which here and there with snakish hair was spread, doth beat the air with waving wings. And as he overflew the Libyc sands, the drops of blood that fall from the head did so of Gorgon being new cut off, upon the ground did fall, which taking them, and as it were conceiving therewithal, engendered sundry snakes and worms, by means whereof that clime did swarm with serpents ever since, even to this present time. From thence he like a watery cloud was carried with the weather through all the heaven, now here, now there, as light as any feather. And from aloft he views the earth that underneath doth lie, and swiftly over all the world doth in conclusion fly. 3 times the chilling bears, 3 times ye crabs fell clees he saw, oft times to the west, oft times to east, did drive him many a flaw. Now as such time as unto rest the sun began to draw, because he did not think it good to be abroad all night, within King Atlas' western realm he ceased from his flight, requesting that a little space of rest and joy he might, until such time as Lucifer should bring the morning gray, and morning bring the lightsome sun that guides the cheerful day. This Atlas, Japhet's nephew, was a man that did excel in stature every other wight that in the world did dwell. The utmost coast of all the earth, and all the sea, wherein the tired steeds and wearied wain of Phoebus drived been, were in subjection to this king. 1,000 flocks of sheep, 1,000 herds of rother beasts he in his fields did keep, and not a neighbor did annoy his ground by dwelling nigh. To him the wandering Percy thus his language did apply. If high renown of royal race thy noble heart may move, I am the son of Jove himself. Or if thou more approve the valiant deeds and halt exploits, thou shalt perceive in me such doings as deserve with praise extolled for to be. I pray thee of thy courtesy, receive me as thy guest, and let me only for this night within thy palace rest. King Atlas called straight to mind an ancient prophecy made by Parnas and Themis, which this sentence did apply. The time shall one day Atlas come, in which thy golden tree shall of his fair and precious fruit despoiled and robbed be. And he shall be the son of Jove that shall enjoy the prey. For fear thereof, he did enclose his orchard every way with mighty hills, and put an ugly dragon in the same to keep it. Further, he forbade that any stranger came within his realm. And to this night he said, presumptuously, avoid my land, unless thou wilt by utter peril try that all thy glorious acts whereof thou doest so loudly lie, and Jove thy father be too far to help thee at thy need. To these his words he added force, and went about indeed to drive him out by strength of hand. To speak was loss of wind, for neither could entreating fair nor stoutness turn his mind. Well then, quoth Percy, since thou dost mine honour set so light, take it a present. And with that he turns away his sight, and from his left drew me out Medusa's loathly head. As huge and big as Atlas was he turned in that stead into a mountain. Into trees his beard and locks did pass, his hands and shoulders made the ridge. The part which lately was his head became the highest top of all the hill. His bones were turned to stones, and therewithal he grew me all at once beyond all measure up in height, for so God thought it best, so far that heaven with all the stars did on his shoulders rest. In endless prison by that time had Aeolus locked the wind, and now the cheerly morning star that putteth folk in mind to rise about the daily work shone brightly in the sky. Then Percy unto both his feet did straight his feathers tie, and girt his wood knife to his side, and from the earth did sty, and leaving nations numberless beneath him every way, at last upon King Cepheus' field in Aethiop did he stay, where clean against all right and law, by Jove's commandment, Andromede for her mother's tongue did suffer punishment, whom to a rock by both the arms one fastened he had seen, he would have thought of marble stone she had some image been, but that her tresses to and fro the whisking wind did blow, and trickling tears, warmed from her eyes, adown her cheeks did flow. Unwares hereat, gan secret sparks within his breast to glow. His wits were straight at sight thereof, and ravished in such wise, as soon as he stayed himself, O lady fair, quoth he, not worthy of such bands as these, but such wherewith we see together knit in lawful bed the earnest lovers be. I pray thee tell me, what thyself and what this land is named, and wherefore thou dost wear those chains. The lady, ill ashamed, was at the sod and striken dumb, and like a fearful maid she durst not speak unto a man. Had not her hands been stayed, she would have hid her bashful face. Howbeit, as she might with great abundance of her tears, she stopped up her sight. But when that Percy oftentimes was earnestly in hand to learn the matter, for because she would not seem to stand in stubborn silence of her faults, she told him what the land and what she hight, and how her mother for her beauty's sake through pride did unadvisedly too much upon her take. And ere she full had made an end, the water gan to roar. An ugly monster from the deep was making to the shore, which bare the sea before his breast. The virgin shrieked out. Her father and her mother both stood mourning thereabout, in wretched ease both twain, but not so wretched as the maid who wrongly for her mother's fault the bitter ransom paid. They brought not with them any help, but as the time and case required, they wept and wrang their hands, and straightly did embrace her body fastened to the rock. Then Percy them bespake and said, the time may serve too long this sorrow for to make, but time of help must either now or never else betake. Now if I, Percy, son of her whom in her father's tower the mighty Jove begat with child in shape of golden shower, who cut off ugly Gorgon's head bespread with snakish hair, and in the air durst trust these wings my body for to bear, perchance should save your daughter's life, I think ye should, as then accept me for your son-in-law before all other men. To these great thews, by the help of God, I purpose for to add a just desert in helping her that is so hard bestead. I covenant with you by my force and manhood for to save her, conditionally that to my wife in recompense I have her. Her parents took his offer straight, for who would stick thereat, and prayed him fair, and promised him that for performing that they would endow him with the right of all their realm beside, like as in a galley with her nose doth cut the waters wide. Enforced by the sweating arms of rowers with the tide, even so the monster with his breast did bear the waves aside, and was now come as near the rock as well a man might fling, and the pure and vacant air a pellet from a sling. When on the sodden Percy pushed his foot against the ground and flied upward to the clouds, his shadow did rebound upon the sea. The beast ran fierce upon the passing shade, and as an eagle when he sees a dragon in a glade, like beaking of his bluish back against the sunny rays, doth cease upon him unaware, and with his talons lays sure hold upon his scaly neck, lest, writhing back his head, his cruel teeth might do him harm. So Percy in that stead, descending down the air amain with all his force and might, did cease upon the monster's back, and underneath the right fin hard unto the very hilt his hooked sword did smite. The monster, being wounded sore, did sometime leap aloft, and sometime under water dive, bestirring him full oft, as doth a chafed boar beset with barking dogs about. But Percy, with his lightsome wings still keeping him without the monster's reach, with hooked sword doth sometime gnaw his back, whereas the hollow scales gave way, and sometime he doth hack the ribs on both his mailed sides, and sometime he doth wound his spindle tail, whereinto fish it grows most small and round. The whale at Percy from his mouth such waves of water cast, bemixed with the purple blood, that all but drained at last his father's very heavy were, and doubting any more to trust his wings, now waxing wet, he straight began to soar up to a rock, which in the calm above the water stood, but in the tempest evermore was hidden with the flood. And leaning thereunto, and with his left hand holding the top thereof, a dozen times his weapon he did thrust among his guts. The joyful noise and clapping of their hands, the which were made for loosening of Andromede from their bands, filled all the coast and heaven itself. The parents of the maid Cassiope and Cepheus were glad and well apaid, and calling him their son-in-law, confessed him to be the help and safeguard of their house. Andromede, the fee and cause of Percy's enterprise from bonds now being free, he washed his victorious hands, and lest the snaky head with lying on the gravel hard should catch some harm, he spread soft leaves and certain tender twigs that on the water grew, and laid Medusa's head thereon. The twigs yet being new and quick and full of juice, pith full lightly to them drew the nature of this monstrous head. For both the leaf and bough full strangely at the touch thereof became both hard and tough. The sea nymphs tried this wondrous fact and divers other rods, and were full glad to see the change, because there was no odds of leaves or twigs, or of the seeds new shaken from the cods. For still, like nature ever since is in our coral found, that look how soon it toucheth air, it waxed hard and sound, and that which under water was a stick, above is stone. 3 altars to as many gods he makes of turf anon, upon the left hand of Mercury's, Minerva's on the right, and in the middle Jupiter's. To Pallas he did dight a cow, a calf to Mercury, a bull to royal Jove. Forthwith he took Andromede the price, for which he strove, endowed with her father's realm. For now the god of love and Hymen unto marriage his mind in haste did move. Great fires were made of sweet perfumes, and curious garlands hung about the house, which everywhere of mirthful music rung the gladsome sign of merry minds. The palace gates were set wide open. None from coming in were by the porters let. All noblemen and gentlemen that were of any port, to this same great and royal feast of Cepheid did resort. Thank you for letting me read to you. Please check the description for where to buy my art, and my channel page for where to send me a one-time donation. And I will, oh yeah, Salome, my audiovisual production of Oscar Wilde's Salome, featuring all my music and drawings, is coming. It's so close to being done. I know I've been saying that for a while, but I'm telling you, you know, I might be exporting it tomorrow. I hope. So I'll see you tomorrow.